Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. And I hope this is coming through okay. Dr. Tim's show was pre-recorded and it was on Podbean. And of course, it won't notify you that it's a live show because it's not live, but it is a session that has been published at 12 o'clock. So it was Brooke Seam, the author of May Cause Side Effects. And so you can pick that up and listen to it. And Michael will be with us here in just a minute. And we trust that you're having an awesome Christmas Eve and preparations for an awesome Christmas Day tomorrow. And we will be live today and tomorrow. I think Dr. Tim's, both of his shows are going to be pre-recorded. And like I said, those will be published at noon Eastern time, 11 o'clock his time. And so you'll be able to pick those up and listen to his pre-recorded shows. So, wait for Michael to get on here and then we'll take off. If you have a question or comment, if you would click at the beginning of the show, because Michael's planning on completing the Book of Thomas by tomorrow. And so once he gets started on that, he'll just probably take off. So anyway, if you have a comment or a question, what you do is you click the little button at the bottom that looks like a telephone, and then it'll ask you, it gives 3 choices of why you're wanting to talk, and just pick, that you want to say hello or whatever. And then scroll down just a little bit, and there's another button that says call in. It puts you in queue, and then we will click on. It says that there is an error retrieving callers. So, Michael, I'm not sure if you are in or not. I'm going to walk into the other room and see. So they do still have some glitches. There's a new upgrade, excuse me, coming out. It says I'm having trouble getting callers, so I may just have to hand you my phone. Alrighty then, I am going to hand this over to Michael.
So if anybody has a comment or a question, I get going, we'll be delighted to do that. We haven't had the opportunity to speak to anybody in a while now. However, we're working through the technology glitches, and hopefully we'll see all things moving forward, and apologies for the games that are coming. So we'll start out with saying Merry Christmas, Happy Holy Days to everyone, whichever holidays you happen to, and excuse the noise in the background, one of my other phones went off here. Technology, what fun. I've got 3 phones I'm playing with right now. So anyway, we're delighted that you're here. And we're going to look at and come down to the closure by tomorrow of the Book of Thomas. We're up to the last few sayings of Thomas. And so we'll hold that we complete tomorrow, and then there'll be the 5 days of special shows with the Healing Through Relationships focal point. We're doing a series on codependence and relationships that are normally our paid video tracks, or audio tracks from our videos. But we're playing those as we are going to be heading to Nashville the day after Christmas. And we ask everybody to hold the space, please, for Ryan, her son, who the 27th will be going into what they're predicting will be a 14-hour brain surgery. And they're removing a golf ball-sized tumor, which they're saying is pretty definitely benign. It's a type of tumor that is benign, and they're feeling quite confident that they'll be 100% successful, and within a couple of months of recovery from balance and those sorts of things with disturbing, it's actually attached to his auditory canal, so there'll be some disturbance of his inner ear, and therefore he'll have to do some physical therapy. And so we invite you to please hold the space for Ryan, that his surgeons are just perfectly guided and directed. Their minds, their hearts are in exactly the right place. And Ryan is in the space where all things moving forward, he's able to process through whatever comes up for him. And after a week or so in Nashville, we've rented a house there. We're staying in Nashville with him and the kids. And so hold the space for us if you would. And we're going to sing 110 from the book of Thomas. And another interesting, you really have to be distinguishing whether he's talking about which world. You know, in the Course in Miracles, it talks about, and we brought this up several times in this series, what is the world? There's a lesson on what is the world. And unfortunately, I wish the capitalization were a little different in the Course in Miracles, because in that particular lesson, it uses the word world two different ways. It uses the word world to represent the actuality of creation. And if they'd made that a capital W world, it would have made it clear that when they use the lowercase w world, they're talking about the world of perception, the world between our ears, the constructs of our minds that come from carbon-based memory, which is where most people live and what most people call their world. It's a totally fabricated world. It's always based in error, and when I say error, I don't mean that if you and someone who are living in that perceptual world, that, you know, something that you work through or work out is not true, but whatever it is you're working out isn't the truth. It is a construct of the mind, oftentimes based in generational patterns. And so when Yeshua talks here about the world, he's talking about the world of perception, and the world that most of us play in, the lowercase w world, where we do things like do business and, you know, all the things that we do. So in essence, he's saying here, he who has found the world, lowercase w world, and become rich. In other words, hey, you've gotten really successful in this world. You've got it made. You got $1 million in the bank. You got the 10,000 square foot home. You got the airplane and the Mercedes, and you got it made. And what he's saying is here is, now deny it. It's time to let go of that world. Especially if you've already got it made. Now take your time, intelligence, money, and energy and put it into the real world. The world that you will experience if you hold a newborn child. And you tap into the essence of that newborn child. Unfortunately, you know, when Yeshua, and this came up earlier in the sessions with the book of Thomas, it talks, the scriptures, the ancient teachings talk about Caesar, you know, well, gee, I got a coin in my hand. Who do I do? Should I pay Caesar? And Yeshua says, well, whose face is on the coin? And he said, well, it's a Caesar. Well, then render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. If you're in that lowercase w world and you're doing business and you're earning from it, then, you know, and then he says, but render to God what is God's. Now he's saying, he's referring to the capital W world. If you're in the capital W world, then your allegiance is to the truth of who you are as love and functioning in relationship to that truth. So now he's saying, so if you become successful, let go of it. If you've reached the pinnacle of what the world calls success, it's time to use your resources and step into your real purpose. We actually do a workshop called Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment. And it gives an exercise for determining what your real purpose is. And my offering is that your real purpose is not to serve Caesar. Your real purpose is not to be a good commercial servant and make money. Now, the world has impressed on every one of us its purpose. And its purpose is serve Caesar. And if you served Caesar and you've been successful, or yet you're saying it's time to do something else. So each of us has been brainwashed with a purpose, and that is to be a good commercial servant. And if you go back, there's some interesting documentation, if you do a little research and reading. Back around the early 1900s, late 1800s, rural America, especially children in rural America, it was an absolute tragedy. I mean, just the health, the way children were cared for, the way education, so-called education was done, was an absolute tragedy. There was a Baptist minister named Frederick T. Gates, and he set out to genuinely improve conditions for those backward children. It's sad if you look today, there are at least 14 states where 20+% of children go to bed hungry every night. There are states where the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, and 20+% of kids go to bed hungry. Well, it was far worse than that back in the 1900s. And John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates got together, and Rockefeller gave hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, the details, if you go research, I mean, it's amazing what he gave. And Gates had this vision of improving the lot of abused, starving, when you read about it, the conditions were just horrendous. And John D., multimillionaire, gave money to improve their condition. However, he gave it with a caveat. He gave it with a reason. You know, there was, I think, this genuine desire to help. But here's what Gates wrote to Rockefeller early in the project of forming the General Education Board. In our dream, he says, we have limitless resources, and the people themselves yield with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present education conventions fade from our mind. Now, they were tragic and unhampered by tradition. So here's Gates writing to Rockefeller. We work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. Now, you might hear echoes of this today. There's a certain group of people who will go unnamed who are talking about shutting down education. You might hear some echoes here. Gates again writes to Rockefeller, we are not to raise up from among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, or musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply. Now, you'll notice that back, when a certain, again, nameless, a certain, so we don't get into politics too much, but a certain actor took over the presidency. And if you watch what happened to higher education in America, the prices skyrocketed through the roof. There was no equal opportunity. And as Gates says here, again, here's his letter to Rockefeller: we will work our own good upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. In other words, we're going to tell these people what their purpose is. We're going to raise their standard, no question. They were so abused, so horrible. So there was this generous, purposeful uplifting that had a purpose. And so basically what Gates was saying is, we're going to keep these kids happy doing the same things as their parents did, doing a better job of it while they stay down on the farm and they go into the shops and they do the labor that they're required to do. Now you'll notice that as time unfolded, things like they put in protections for children who were forced to labor and work. Do a little reading of what's been going on the last year or two in America, and you'll notice that a certain group of people in a certain type of state, many of them, it's very well planned, are destroying child worker protections so they can put the kids back in the labor, back in the farm. It's interesting, Arkansas back, I don't know, a year or two ago, there was a company that was using child labor in dangerous jobs in slaughterhouses, cleaning, slaughtering equipment and such, using kids to do it. And they were fined, I forget how much, a lot of money. And a short time later, the governor of Arkansas put forward a bill that would eradicate a portion of those child labor protections so that those companies were protected and allowed to use child labor. It's like interesting, the circle is coming back. But it wasn't much different 2,000 years ago. And so we've been brainwashed into believing that our purpose in general in the culture, and this General Education Board basically set up education throughout America, that we had a job, and the job was to be good commercial servants. And what Yeshua is saying today, if you become a highly paid, good, successful commercial servant, okay, now you're finished. Now get on with what your real life is about. And you're going to have to overcome the brainwash of the culture, literally overcome the ways we have been brainwashed to produce perceptions that keep us coming back to functioning out of that brainwash. Because when we overcome that, we step into another arena, we step into another dimension of human life, which is where our real purpose is. 2,000 years ago, Yeshua said this, read it in Revelations, to he that overcomes, and basically we're saying the world, the brainwash, he says, shall not taste of the second death. What is the first death? The first death, okay, let's step back a little bit. We have a newborn baby, we're holding the baby, we're tapping into the child, the essence of the child. And every one of the thousands of people we've asked this question of answers with words that are always some variation on the theme of love. And I'd offer that, to me, establishes when I realized, like, Jeanie and I we've been in Greece and asked these questions. I've been in China and asked it. I've been in Tibet. We've been all over the world and asked this question. We've been in Barbados. We've been in Trinidad and Tobago. We've been in South America. We've been all over the globe. And everybody's answer for the newborn is always some variation on the theme of love. And notice, looking at the hostility and fear in the world today, you'll notice that part of the brainwash has been to basically beat that out of people, brainwash that out of people, and give them an identity that's based on what the world wants from them. So a false identity. And you remember Yeshua says, in order for you to live, you've got to die. In order for the being that you are, the created essence that you are, the serving of the real purpose of your life, you're going to have to die to that self. That self is going to have to be overcome. And that's what he's saying here. So he that overcomes, he shall not taste of the second death. First death is when we, as the presence of love, lose our awareness of ourselves as that and become the brainwashed self that functions out of all of the dynamics of the insane world. The second death is when, as a result of having experienced the first death and buying into hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, drama, and trauma, all of those things that destroy the awareness of ourselves as the presence of love, that leads to the death of, or the disintegration, the falling apart, the coming undone of our energy system, which is called a body-mind unit. So the second death is the death of what we call the body. But he says, if you overcome this non-being self, this brainwashed self that the world has brainwashed you into, he says, he will not taste of that second death. He will become, or she will become, a pillar in the temple of the Creator and shall go out no more. That's a promise of eternal life. Now, I know people say, well, Michael, that's foolish. Look, everybody's dying. Yeah, you'll remember the scriptures talk about there'll come a time when the whole world will be fooled. We'll all be buying into it. But, here's what I know with my background in physics is that energy is eternal. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And since energy can be neither created nor destroyed, and there's nothing else but energy, you and I must be energy. And if we are, then what's our real purpose? Are we here to do this? What did one of the poets call it? This loveless toil and die? Let's use a metaphor. Imagine that we have a child in utero. And imagine that it's required, fortunately we don't have to do this, but imagine that you have to build your own body in utero. And imagine the child that 3 months into the process, 3 months after conception, says, this building a body is just too much work. I quit. I'm not going to do it. When that child is forcibly ejected into the world, when that fetus is forcibly ejected into the world, are we going to have a viable human being if at 3 months the body stopped developing? Obviously not. Well, what I hear Yeshua saying, and basically this is the root of our workshop called Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment, is that each human being comes with a certain work to do and has both a primary and a secondary purpose. My offering is that the primary purpose of every human being is to develop awareness of themselves as eternal spiritual beings created of the essence of love. And of course, we have a worksheet for that. If you go to our website and take a look, or Jeanie's probably already put in the notes for today, a link to the worksheet from the Purpose Workshop. And it goes through an exercise that assists in alleviating the brainwash of the world that we're designed to be good commercial servants, develop a skill, get a job, make money, pay taxes, and die. If we're limited to that, then we've lost our human lives. But when we recognize that we have the real purpose of having an opportunity to be in a body is to develop this spiritual body, to develop literally If we talk to the child in utero that's building its physical body, we'd say your job is to build a viable physical body. And to the soul, to the being, we're saying here, what Yeshua is saying is, if you become successful in the world, now deny the world, throw that away. You got all the resources you need. Now put your resources, your time, your intelligence, your money, and your energy into building a viable, conscious, spiritual body. So that if your body happens to die, you get to carry on. And when you ask most people what their purpose is, they kind of go, I don't know. I guess make money. Get a job. Get a good job. It's not your purpose. And so there are, built into the Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment workshop, the worksheet, is an exercise for overcoming the brainwash and starting to look at what your true purpose is. And I'd like to share just the result. The worksheet's very intuitive. You can just, you can look at it and it's pretty self-explanatory. But I'm going to share both my purpose, and this is not what I was brought up with. This isn't what I did. I was brought up that the idea, the purpose of life was, make money. I had 3 businesses. I had 60 employees. I had a Mark III on one side of my driveway. I had an Eldorado on another. I had a penthouse apartment in one city and homes in 2 other cities. I thought that's what it was about. And then I came across this work and basically did what Yeshua in this particular passage is saying. Okay, if you got successful at it, now walk away from it. And literally, I walked away from that whole scene, went back to school. I got rid of the Eldorado. I got rid of the Mark III. I got rid of the penthouse apartment. And I literally traded out. There were 2 guys that owned an apartment building in Atlanta. And they had small one-room. They'd converted a big old house into one-room apartments. And I traded with them living in one of their one-room apartments for taking care of the building for them while I went to school. And the thing that made the shift for me out of that business game was I realized it was time for me to put away the world and get about my real work. So I'm going to share just the end result so it gives you kind of a picture of what the result might be as you look at your unique secondary purpose. Your primary purpose is the same as mine. It's the same as Yeshua, the same as the people Yeshua is speaking to today, the same as the people I'm speaking to today. It's all the same. Build an eternal, viable, conscious spiritual body. So you're aware out of your being rather than from your mind. And then everyone has a secondary purpose. Everyone has a certain way of functioning, has certain innate skills, abilities, things they enjoy doing. And the worksheet lays those things out and shows you how to use them to produce a purpose statement that's in alignment. Energy systems don't bring through more energy by efforting. If I've got a television over here, I can't say, the picture on channel 2 is a little snowy television. Would you put a little more effort into that? Hey, antenna, would you put more effort into getting that signal from channel 2? No, I'd go up and I'd adjust the antenna so that it was properly aligned. I'd adjust the TV so it's properly aligned. Then the energy exchange would be more viable and I'd get a better picture, better sound. So each person, when you tweak your secondary purpose aligns with your primary. And now as you start to align your primary, your secondary, your thoughts, the filters in your mind, your words, you put everything in line. That's where, and the workshop is purpose, personal power, and commitment. That's where your personal power comes from. And my offering is that personal power is the ability, the best definition I've found yet, is the ability to be continuously aware of and function out of your highest guidance, out of your highest being. That's where personal power comes from. And it's an aligning process that strengthens that power. So when I first met Jeanie, she started to work on her purpose statement, and in 2017 she did a big revision of it. I don't know whether she's done a revision of it since. I don't think so. Maybe some fine tuning, but I'll just share the end result of that worksheet for her, and then I'll share mine with you, and you'll see. And so many people over the years that I've seen, when they do that worksheet and they realize what they're really here for, it just turns, their decisions, their behaviors turn on a dime and move in a different direction. So Jeanie's purpose statement, and she wrote it in 2017, and it's on the website. I now use my deep devotion to my family and friends to be supportive, enjoy time together, listening and sharing. I will nourish and comfort others as I create a safe space for healing to happen. And it's interesting, Jeanie, just how powerfully this first paragraph aligns with what we're getting ready to do and going to Nashville and being there for Ryan's healing on the next level. So I will nourish and comfort others as I create a safe space for healing to happen. I will use my writing abilities to produce a book that shares my experiences of healing and expresses the potential and hope to others. And Jeanie is working on her book as we speak. I now use my love for learning to search for truth, and then use my teaching skills to share my highest understanding with those whose paths I cross. I use my intuition, my inner tutor, to follow in the way of peace. I will stay committed, fully aware, responsible, and connected to God. I will radiate the love in me, be a clear voice to my calling, so that my life produces a longing in others to follow in the way of truth. Powerful statement, Jeanie. To join me on the path to do likewise, make a difference. I will use my organizational administrative skills in accord with this purpose to have such an impact on this planet that we create the shift where we all experience our being, love, and live in truth and harmony as the Creator originally planned. So that's Jeanie's statement of her secondary purpose. And as I say, as a kid, when I came up and, graduated school, it was about being in business. Make money. Spend money. I look at how much money I wasted in those early years. I turned over a lot of dollars, and it's like, oh my God, if I had that today to put into this work. But that's another statement. That's maybe a worksheet I need to do. Breathe a little bit on that one. So my current purpose statement, I now use my being, compassion, caring, processing capacity, and ability to nurture people, along with my communication skills and ability to synthesize information and gently confront people to learn and teach true forgiveness on a planet-wide scale. As my beloved and I travel the planet, every interaction we have inspires each person who hears us to contact and express their highest creative abilities and being, so that together we create a world where each supports every other in the full expression of their true essence and purpose. Defining and setting plans and goals that supports full achievement of this purpose, and doing the things to carry it out while maintaining time for each other to keep romance alive and heal together are easy and automatic and supported by Ruka and all of life. So if you can see how, if you tapped into your true purpose, rather than what the culture has brainwashed you into, this statement from Yeshua, statement 110, makes it become so simple. He who has found the world and become rich, let him deny the world. Like, it doesn't hold anything you want except sensation. And the kids had a song out a few decades back. The song was, I can't get no satisfaction. Remember that one? All you can get from the world is sensation. There will never be satisfaction from it. The more you consume of the world's sensation, the more it will take to bring about satisfaction. The brain adapts and makes sensation meaningless. So what we're looking to do with this world, as opposed to provide people with sensation, that's another, oh boy, I got this sensation going. What we're looking to do this work is to provide transformation, to move beyond the world of sensation and literally transform everything of the brainwash, everything based. Wherever there is the brainwash, there is always at the root of it some form of hostility or fear. You know, I talked about, 14 states where 20+% of children go hungry every day. Who can tolerate that? Who would vote for that? And yet every one of those 14 states, and it's 14 out of the 15 who have poverty rates of 20% plus. And all but I believe one of them has a minimum wage of either $5.25 an hour to $7.25 an hour. And the people who are limited to that vote for it. And it's mind-boggling. But you can see that Frederick T. Gates and the Rockefeller money did its job well and brainwashed people into being happy down on the farm. And you'll notice that it's the division is becoming wider and wider. It's taking more and more money and therefore more and more debt to get out of the hole, to become upwardly mobile socially, to get out of the trauma-based mind and the trauma-based life, and to get into a life that supports wholeness and well-being. Those states where those children are starving, they have the highest rates of maternal and infant mortality. And in fact, in 2022, this is hard to believe with our technology and what gets spent on what's called healthcare in this country. But in 2022, maternal mortality was the highest rate it has ever been in America. More women died in and as a result of childbirth than at any time in history. And the health care deserts that brings that result, the infant mortality rate, the food deserts, people who don't have the money, don't have a car to drive 10 miles to a grocery store that has actual food, or even though it's not actual food, at least it's pseudo food. It's not as is available in these places with food deserts where all you've got is a corner gas station and every product is loaded with deadly fats, sugar, and drugs. Interesting. And it's time for us to wake up. I remember when we were was doing an intensive at Heartland, I went down to a town in the south side of where we were in Missouri into Arkansas. And this little grocery store just a little small family-owned grocery store. And I went into it, and there's this little lady who had been in the store before and talked to her, and she was a good church-going lady. And this one day I went into the store, and she's selling a 6-pack of beer to a guy that's so drunk he can hardly stand up. It's like, what? Who supports this? What's going on? And why does a person become so addicted to alcohol they can't even take care of conceiving of themselves? Conceive of taking care of themselves. What goes on in a culture that can happen? It's bizarre. And if I'd have sat down with this lady in a private conversation, I'm sure she'd have told me all about the evils of alcohol. But here she is in her little family store selling a 6-pack of beer to a guy who can hardly stand up. What have we been brainwashed into? What have people been convinced is worth doing for a lousy buck, that they give up who they are as human beings? And I offer that's all part of the brainwash that just needs to be healed, just needs to be forgiven. So that was saying 110. And then we have 111. And here Yeshua says in saying 111, the heavens shall be rolled up and the earth before your face, and he who lives in the living one shall neither see death nor fear. Because Yeshua says, he who shall find himself, of him the world is not worthy. So this is kind of an extension of that last statement. It's like, once you've found who you are as the active presence of love, what is there in the world to invest in or participate in aside from extending and expanding the presence of human life on earth? And when you recognize that simply having a human form does not mean that there's a human being there. Human life, I would offer, is the active presence of love. In a mind where there is no active love, there is no human life. So the heavens will be rolled up and the earth before you. In other words, nothing that the world offers is going to be of attraction. And when you live in the living one, when you live in and as the active presence of love, death is no longer a part of life. Disease and suffering are no longer a part of life. And one needs to engage in the tools, the work required, once they deny the world, in order to undo, forgive, remove the influences of the world. In a world where forgiveness has been turned backward and we're told that, the only reason I'm in pain is because of what you did, and so I should forgive you. Please never forgive anyone for anything. So he who shall find himself, of him the world is not worthy. Once you know who you are, what is there in the world that's worth bothering with aside from supporting the expansion of human life? So first off, if you flood your mind and body with the pure essence of love that you are, now we feel, and we feel according to the energetic dynamics that we hold within ourselves. If we go to the opening words in the book of John, we refer to this one often. It doesn't say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. It says, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. And we have a warning system that tells us the quality of the mind energy we're engaging in. It's called emotions. Now, everybody's been trained to blame everybody else. I'm angry because you did this. I'm afraid because you did that. You made me sad. You hurt me. Everybody's engaged in the lie. If you find yourself, you'll stop telling the lie and you'll start to take responsibility. And when you begin to dissolve the hostility and fear-based dynamics of your generational patterns and of your life, fear and death, decay, cannot gain a foothold. And when you taste that, when you collapse, you actually use the tools and you collapse the hostility and fear, and you get that absolute magnificent experience of the presence of love fueling every cell. It's like, whoa, what a taste. And once you've tasted it, that becomes the marker by which you measure your life. Maintaining it's a challenge because the energetic patterns that create feelings have been developing in the body-mind unit, in this multi-generational database called the body-mind unit, for eons and eons and eons. And we're continuously experiencing a reflection of that accumulated multi-generational database as emotions, or what people call feelings. They create sensations. And oftentimes, like for instance, why the alcohol? Because people are trying to alleviate the sensation of what they've done to themselves, of the mind energy they've engaged in, of what energetic patterns they're destroying themselves with. And alcohol, remember the song that goes along with it, Feeling No Pain. It's a great anesthetic. You take 2 molecules of alcohol, you take the water out, you've got ether. You can saw bones with that. And when you realize that, it's like, why is there even such a thing tolerated in any sane culture as alcohol? It's like, why, who would ever make this fluid available to their friends? You know, it's a thing I post often on my Facebook page that I've written on alcohol, and it's about aliens being shocked. And they find out that people have this special cabinet in their homes where they keep this celebratory fluid that helps people to have a good time, and they give it to their most cherished friends and family. And the alien watches as this celebratory fluid that helps people have a good time is consumed. And what he watches is the terrorism and the trauma and the violence that happens when that fluid starts to flow. And he scratches his head like, whoa, what's with these humans? How can you do this to each other? He who lives in the living one shall not see death or fear. If you flood your physiology with the truth of who you are as a human being, the pure essence of love, fear cannot gain a foothold. Decay cannot exist or coexist with that presence of love. Many, many years ago, I attended a medical conference, and there was a representative of a group called the DeCourcy Clinic in Cincinnati. And they had done research on aging. And of course, we all know age happens over time. In fact, we have a saying where we say, well, how old is that child? Some people are shocked when they ask us, how old Arya is? And I say to them, she isn't. And they look at me like, what do you mean she isn't old? And yet it's built into the culture. Remember, mind energy becomes flesh. It's a brainwash. You have to be careful what you engage in. But here's what this group from the DeCourcy Clinic in Cincinnati concluded in their research of aging. Time is not toxic. All of those who develop a time neurosis subscribe to the prevalent superstition that time is in some way a poison, exerting a mysterious cumulative action. Time has no effect on human tissues under any condition. Vigor and health does not vary inversely with age. It is the belief in the effects of time by those who subscribe to such a belief that acts as a poison. There is no scientific basis for believing that the passage of years automatically causes our bodies to age. How does that fit with this same statement from Yeshua? The heavens and earth shall be rolled up in the earth before your face, and he who lives in the living one will neither see death nor fear. You'll evaporate all of that mind energy that's based in a lie. Understanding that it's the quality of the energies we carry within us and continuously subject ourselves to, the habits we engage, the activities that we support, not the passage of time that causes what appears to be the result of the accumulation of years. We can reverse the effects of what appears to be time by removing toxic energetic influences we've been tricked into believing are caused by time, simply because their effects happen to appear over time. So heavens and earth will roll up. What does that mean? You'll go beyond the appearance that perception creates and its false constructs. And one of its false constructs is that of death. Heavens and earth will roll up. You'll go beyond all the appearances in the mind as you wake up and, as this passage says, live in the living one. What is the living one? It is that eternal active presence of love in which we live, move, and have our being. And when we attune ourselves to it, then we step into a different world. And then saying 112. Yeshua says, woe to the flesh which depends upon the soul, and the soul which depends upon the flesh. It's time to step into balance and recognize that there is a third element in the equation. This is where what in the Aramaic was called Ruku de Kudsha is needed. Remain connected to the source. You know, I tell the story in the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop when we get to the section on the core of forgiveness and the story of the rose and the butterfly. Imagine that the rose and the butterfly, we give them each an ego. They meet, they fall in what the world calls love. They have this great time together. But one day the butterfly up and flies away. The rose, knowing that the love of the butterfly is the most important, quote unquote, love of the butterfly is the most important thing in its life, uproots itself to give chase. What's going to happen to that rose? It's going to die. Whenever we make something more important than being connected to our source, and our direct connection to source is through our breath. And you watch how much time people spend holding their breath. When trauma starts to move in them, when pain starts to move in them, how they radically altered their breathing pattern and stopped breathing altogether. When we radically alter our breathing pattern or stop breathing altogether, we've disconnected from our source. We're just like the rose that's uprooted itself. If you go to the original creation story, it doesn't say the Creator sent out its spirit. It says the Creator sent out its breath. The Creator breathed into Adamos, the red clay, Nafsha, the created spiritual being. In that story, there are two words that represent the human. One is the physiological, the earthbound form, called the body, and the other is the being. In Aramaic, the word that represented the being is Nafsha. And the word that represented the body was Adamos. And you remember in the creation story, and the Creator breathed into Adamos Nafsha. And Nafsha became an incarnate or a living being. And that breath is where the connection is. So to remain connected to that source, soul and body both, without being connected, are lost. So this breath further explained, if you're holding trauma energies that are based in death, the bottom line and what it says is that this Rukudukudsha, this what was referred to as a feminine elemental force, the feminine aspect of the Creator, she who undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. That when we're available, when we're ready to listen, instead of listening to carbon-based memory and the generational patterns and the patter and the beat of the world, then everything changes. So let's just take a moment and let's breathe together. Breathing with you. And just allow everything within you to soften. And as everything in you softens, notice where there's any form of tension that holds the breath out of your tissue structure. And as you gently breathe, allow everything within you, allow this feminine elemental force, this aspect of the Creator that was given to you directly, allow it to just move into every cell of your structure. And as it does, feel the enlivening power, literally, of the breath of the Creator. Again, the Creator did not, if you look at the Aramaic rendition of the creation story, did not send out some sort of a disembodied spirit being, but rather sent out the breath. And I'll tell you that in 4+ decades of taking people through the still point breathing process, I've watched people in every kind of trauma that you could possibly imagine, right in the middle of the deepest parts of that trauma. And if instead of holding their breath and locking the energy in tissue, they will simply breathe, there is nothing that breath will not undo in you. And if there's any part of your tissue structure that you notice as you really pay attention to your form, if there's any part of your tissue structure that you're holding your breath, Allow your breath to gently enter into that part of your structure. And just focus on the Aramaic meaning of this breath. It is a feminine elemental force in you that, when invited, will literally undo the effects of your errors. And if you're ready to listen, it will literally teach you the truth.